Hello, everyone. Welcome to another show, Espresso with Vinny. And we're going to start off with a big sip of the espresso. He hasn't had it in a few days. He's chasing everyone around the house for espresso. All right, buddy. Today's subject. We're going to talk about that big, scary subject of who's alpha. Strong personality like you, huh? So where we're at with all this alpha nonsense that people say is nonsense, when it's not nonsense. Well, the reality of alpha dogs. So a lot of people are really good at regurgitating information, but don't think. So I'm going to talk about that subject in alpha. When we talk about like wolf packs and they talk about the alpha wolf, you'll see it sometimes in trailers where they're way in the back of the line and they've got all the pack and, the pups and the mamas. And then, they got a pack of like 4 or 5 really strong young wolves up in front. This is not the alpha wolf being subservient or trying to create equality. Okay, there's no DEI here. Okay, what the dog is doing, what this wolf is doing, is staying in the back because it's kind of like a military operation. You can't get ambushed from the back, and he's going to be there watching. He's experienced. Where they're going, he can see where they're going and make sure he can watch everybody at the same time from 180-degree view like this. Although wolves can see pretty much in a 90-degree to 45-degree going back behind their eye. And they're going to look and watch that, and they're going to make sure everyone's in the right position. So this alpha wolf male's in the back, and then he's got his dogs out there that are younger alphas in the working out front. So it is not being subservient or trying to create equality or understanding. Okay, I want to clarify. So moving forward with that, well, let's understand when you hear, let's say, veterinarians that have been brainwashed again, you hear me say in their school and their teaching, they're told that there's no alpha and there's no pack and all this because these are vets that never had hunting dogs, they never worked out in the wild, they never spent the summers on a ranch somewhere and watched how dogs behave, whether it was down in South Africa and you're talking about Rhodesian Ridgebacks or out here in the United States with some of the hound dogs and the hunting packs going after boar in Texas. They don't see that. What they've seen is only what their textbooks tell them, and their textbooks have said that there's no such thing as a pack when there is a pack, because it would blow your mind. You would be frightened at how organized their packs are amongst domestic dogs, not just wild dogs. Moving forward, that is the veterinarian. If you were to challenge his veterinarian schools, especially in today's world, right, where it's misinformation. Be careful what you say. That veterinarian would probably lose his license or be threatened, reprimanded, or preaching the wrong thing. But I guarantee you, if one of the veterinarian's employees challenged the opinion of what the veterinarian was saying, he probably would fire his employee. So isn't the veterinarian taking an alpha dominant position? Because dominance, toxic, is alpha. And so now this employee's got his butt fired because he challenged his boss. So hypocrisy. It's everywhere you look. All right. Next subject. Anyway, Vinny, yeah, he's in a little bit of a love bug today, but that's typical of pitties. If you've ever owned one, they love to cuddle all day. Yeah. Okay, man. All right. So I've always been an advocate of defending truth. And I lived in those jungles out there in Latin America, and I would see how animals behave in the hierarchy in the pack order. So there is a universal consciousness of order, and we see it amongst these mammals quite often. Some people refer to it as Darwin's theory or whatever they want to call it, but there is a universal consciousness of alpha order amongst these animals. And until you witness the savagery of how these animals will not hesitate to be survival of the fittest to protect their own species, you really don't understand what you're saying. Or when you hear somebody else quote you something, and I love it when I read comments in some of the social media, they write the R plus, that's the sacred, like the dude, I know what I'm talking about. I did my multiple choice test to become a dog trainer, and I know R plus, and it's proven to science, and I sound so sophisticated, like they're doing some quantum theorem. It's BS. What we have to understand is that these animals in their savagery, in their pack order, are very disciplined. And we have to, when we're training them, we have to get ourselves away from this, 501c3 mentality where we have a membership to a dog organization and we think we know what we're talking about. I always say God's way is not a 501c3. It's just simply the truth. End of story. Done. Nothing to talk about past that. And when you observe animals, you're getting truth. They're not going to lie to you and they're not politicians. So that's, of course, why we love them. We come home, and we all know this as dog lovers. We just get the real thing. They make lousy politicians. They just tell you how they think, and they just love you and love you. All right, all right, Vinny. Of course, Vinny knows. All right. Sometimes I feel that these people that say they're quoting the science really kind of just abused like a copyright infringement, because nature is God, it's the creator, and you're 501c3, and your opinion of throwing out there as the science, it's like you're in a copyright infringement with God, because like who gave you the right to just like not speak the truth? I mean, if you really look at something, you can see what it is. You can see it from all angles. So that brings me to my next topic of what my industry has led into in the past probably 2 decades. I have watched, again, the people that think they're speaking science try to destroy people speaking truth. And again, saying it's dangerous information, shut us down, not give us rights to train dogs. And I'm bringing this up because many of you are not aware of what the good dog trainers that do seek truth have been punished for many decades now, constantly by the crazies that think that they know more. And it becomes that financial war because they want to win the competition. And there's is the new and latest modern, when nature never got modernized. It is what it is. It's been around for too many millions and millions of years, endless time. And when we speak the truth, then we get different organizations and people shutting you down from, I've seen some legitimate dog trainers on Netflix and a few other programs where they were just showing proper ways to use different equipment, and then they just start one of those little online vote to yay or nay to get somebody off the next season in the air. And so now they start a big caravan of what I call the muffin crowd, the people that never got outside their little muffin and watching TV and giving their dog a snack. They have no idea what reality is. They're so unbelievably domesticated. They don't even understand these dogs. They vote this guy out, and it's not fair. And they've tried to do it to us all the time. We've had plenty of people approach authentic dog trainers on social media, and myself, when I go out in the parks and different locations, I see people that are constantly staring at as if they're the supervisor and they get to tell me what to do. It's amazing, the ridiculous confidence. And I've also seen it more so in places like California. If I'm out working in some other states, people tend to mind their own business, and they tend to understand that dogs and animals are animals, and they're living around a lot of wilderness and national parks, and they understand that. So it seems to be a more of a kind of a delusional east-west problem, unfortunately. So I will refer to them kind of as the non-thinkers going forward. So these non-thinkers will approach us and say that, again, that this is the science, and then they try to shut us down. And this carries us over into where we're seeing ourselves today as a society, into what we call inalienable rights, meaning it's a born right, it's God-given right. And many Americans, I find, don't understand this. Unfortunately, too many attorneys don't seem to understand this anymore. They're brainwashed as well. It shows you who's running our law schools. Shame on them, because I gladly challenge them any day. This is ridiculous. I was raised in a family of attorneys. I understand constitutional law quite well. And an inalienable right, Americans, you are born with it. Okay, that means a judge, nor your sheriff, nor your local mayor, or your governor, or your senate can just take it away. It's not an individual decision, and it cannot go on hold temporarily until it goes to an appellate court and a higher court and up to a Supreme Court. Okay, it's actually written in the U.S. Constitution. It's their problem. And a matter of fact, if you challenge a constitutional right of free speech, the way I want to talk about dog training and what the truth is, or any subject for that matter, it's not something that I get shut down temporarily for. It is my inalienable right. That's my First Amendment right. You cannot declare it a threat to society because I'm not preaching the truth. Quite on the contrary, I am preaching the truth. And whether I don't agree with the non-thinkers is irrelevant. I don't get to shut them down either. So this is it. Unfortunately, it comes down to me doing a podcast talking about this because people really don't understand beyond reasonable doubt. Like, what is a fact? A fact is not someone printing articles on a piece of paper. I want to see solid evidence of how dogs are behaving in front of my eyes. I want to see how they react in groups and different types of strong personalities and what treat feeding would do, what shock collar training do, what positive reinforcement does, what type of physical corrections are not considered negative. So remember, you don't necessarily have a negative feeling with the dog just because you're making a physical correction. The species, again, is relative to the species. They are used to physical force to enforce rules. But so are children. You could grab their arm as they're crossing the street, and you can grab it tightly and suddenly, because you're warning them that's really dangerous where you're going, don't go in the street. That's a physical force that you're using. You're not going to put a chocolate in front and go, come on, redirect. And what is a leash for? It's to constrain the animal, the dog, from doing something that you don't want it to do. So isn't that a form of physical force? But they call it like, punitive and aggressive, and it's never going to work. And all the dog does is retaliate. And of course, when you're a wimp, you're going to lose the UFC, the football game. You're going to lose the soccer match. You're going to lose it all because you don't know how to fight to win. So I have always preached to clients, my techniques are different because I will approach a dog and the dog knows I'm trying to win, but I'm not hostile. I don't want to actually physically hurt the dog, but there's physical force being used relative to the size of the dog, the level of their aggression, their ability and their endurance to try to determine to win over me. And lo and behold, I return within minutes of a dog wagging its tail and obeying. So we see some other talented trainers do this on social media. What people don't understand is they're constantly full of this conflict of what they've read online. And I believe that reading this conflict of information that you see on YouTube is kind of like going to, the Port of Sacramento in California and educating your kids. I mean, you understand what I'm saying. It's ridiculous. Okay. It's not reality. And when you're training your dog, you need to understand that your dog is not going to pull any politics. It will definitely challenge you to different levels and degrees. Some can be passive, some can be fearful, some can be very aggressive, some have a lot of endurance, some have very little endurance. You adapt, adjust accordingly, and that could be by every 5 minutes you're adapting, because it could be a mix of problems. So a true dog trainer and behaviorist can adjust to the animal perfectly. And I've gone through this before where it's your vocal tones, it's the speed at which you work, it's how you stand in front of the dog, the body language, the corrections released, how fast they are, what the intervals are. These all start adding up. And the better and more experienced you are, there's no substitute for a highly experienced dog trainer that knows how to just feel their way and kind of be the little Yoda and move their way into those dogs, feel their energy and transform them into being good dogs. And so keep in mind when you're reading or watching videos that have all this information out there that confuses you, that most of this was written by people that have egos that don't allow them to seek truth anymore. And that is very dangerous. Egos throughout centuries and studying history is what starts wars and conflicts. I mean, if you put your ego down and you actually look at how dogs respond, then it will work. But if you're a non-thinker, no matter what I say in a podcast, you're just a write-off. Okay? That's just a long vacation for you. Covering universal laws mean this. No matter where I would go in the universe, certain things will have a common interest. Meaning darkness, really not darkness, it's an absence of light. Or maybe it's an absence of light that you don't see, but there is light, right? There's different spectrums of light. So everything becomes relative, depending on the species you are, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell. Wherever there's a void, it's like a weather system, low barometric pressure drops, you can expect more clouds, wind, and possibly a storm. So there's always this balance, and there's always this balance between good and evil, and it shifts. So when you deal with a dog and it has these mental conflicts of like, what should I do? Should I hoard the food? Should I guard the food? Then when people get intimidated or overspoil the dog endlessly, even for bad behavior, you find yourself with a dog that is now spoiled and not only instinctually doing something like hoarding food, but also saying it's the Me Too generation. I can get away with what I want to get away with. And so that's where the complex comes in, and you have to learn how to like work around and maneuver it to eventually get a good end result. Well, in my last podcast, I was going over some of the other topics of quantum physics. So here's a little bit of follow-up. If you if you were to try to look at the quantum mirror and we split it, right? And we're on one side in the physical 3D, that's only about 4% of the molecules in the universe on this side. You have 96% of the molecules in the universe on the other side of quantum mirror. So these antimatter particles are more important to our existence and our laws of attraction and energy than anyone ever gave credit for. And therefore, when you speak to dogs and you speak to anything, you could have a fish, you could have a bird, you're really speaking at 96% energy waves from the antimatter. This really becomes just as important as what I'm doing in front in the physical. Their brains are very susceptible to this. Humans, once they become conscious of this and they start realizing your thoughts are creating this energy, and your apprehension and your fear of like what the dog going to do at the end of the leash has a lot to do with what's happening with you in the parks and when you're approaching other dogs, and your avoidance or your distractions and trying to compromise for this animal. So be very careful about your energy levels. So if you put an earplug in and you have it in and you walk around the park and listen to some pleasant music that puts you in a happy mood and relaxes you a little bit, and you walk around the park and you tap your hip and you talk to your dog and get a tail wag and you see some other dogs, don't assume the worst, because now you have created this energy. It's 96% on the other side where it's flowing in, that it's a constant, like a membrane in the middle, and we're going back and forth with these energy levels. So you have to be very careful of how you communicate with these live animals around you, and including the people and the other dogs that you see in the street. So be very in tuned is the best word of how your state of consciousness is. If you find yourself negative, you find yourself hostile, yeah, again, listen to some music. Do some, like, you can do audiobooks on your phone and like listen to things that are like to focus on like better improvement of stress levels and understanding laws of attraction. And I listen to a lot of this sort of thing a lot, just for dealing with like keeping my mind on track and feeling good and positive and refusing to become, downhill into a negative slope. So last night I was walking through the park and I see a lady with a dog healing perfectly by her side, little Maltese. This elderly lady says, "Is your dog friendly? I had Vinny with me." And I said, "Yes, he worked great with small dogs, big dogs. He's a friendly guy, he's well trained." So the little dog comes up and says hello and greets Vinny. And sure enough, the little dog attacks Vinny in the face. So Vinny, he's used to this, working with me in dog behavior. So he knows to be patient. He's a good boy. But it was just ironic that here's the big pit bull that's being patient, doesn't hurt the little dog, and the stigma that people have about pit bulls. And if you really know what you're doing with these type of strong-headed working breeds, they're wonderful dogs. If you're having problems with them, call me. If you're outgunned and it's not your personality, then don't get into pit bull rescue and take them home. But I will say, the Me Too generation at the end of that story was a little irritating, because she walked away and I said, "Excuse me, your dog is not friendly with dogs. Why did you ask if my dog was friendly? Your dog approached my dog and attacked my dog. Hello?" And she said nothing to me. I said, "Yeah, you have a nice day with your aggressive dog." So no apology. And I find that very common. And I find it also disgusting. There's a lot of people like that out there today. So I am going to send more messages to people, what is very true and spiritual, and that is the absence of God and love is evil, because when you lack it, you tend to not care about anybody else. So knock it all you'd like, roll your eyes all you like at my comments, but I say it's true. You need to have love in your heart. You need to accept there's a greater power out there that created us, and that's how we're all going to make it through all these difficult times together with the good people. Do not let these negative people drag you down. You just have to forgive them and try to enlighten them, because unfortunately, even though she owned an animal, she still didn't understand what love and respect is. It's probably a trophy for her that just, it's all about her and the animal being with her. All right. What we do as dog trainers and dog owners is to stay informed. That's the purpose of my podcast, to challenge thought and promote freedom of speech, because without it, you should never trust anyone who tries to shut you down and accuse you of being dangerous. Because by all means, sharing ideas is healthy. And we can all have a sense of humor and laugh at one another at the end of the day, but it's best that we share thoughts and we are not controlled by anybody else. Imagine what music would be like, poetry, writing, painting, or any of this with regulatory committees saying you're dangerous, you're not allowed to do that. It would be ridiculous. So stay strong, everybody, and keep promoting freedom of speech. It's an inalienable right. It's a God-given right. No one can temporarily take it away from you. And a matter of fact, it is a felony for someone to even come together in our government, if our leaders come together and talk about trying to get rid of a amendment in our Constitution. To threaten an amendment is a felony. Yes, they're committing felony. Okay, stay free, guys. Love all of you. Cheers. Espresso with Vinny.